Let's check out the HIS 7870 GHz edition with the IceQ cooling unit. Now this one has 2 GB of GDDR5, it's a PCI Express 3.0 card, and it's really fast for the money. I looked online, I saw it for 200 bucks, and I was like, wait a minute, 7870, 200 bucks, fancy cooling unit, what? So I grabbed 2 of them, and I'm very impressed with it. We've got a 1000 MHz core clock, 2048 megabytes of GDDR5, 256-bit memory interface, and the memory runs effectively at 4800 megahertz. It can be overclocked, and I did a very small overclock in some of the benchmarks, and we'll get to that in just a second. The size of the card, 14 by 4.4 by 29.7 centimeters. Let's talk about the IceQ cooling unit. Now you see here we have the heat pipes coming out of the top. There's a copper plate that's going to go right on top of the GPU. And at the back, you can see they call it the black hole impeller. Now the black hole impeller, what's nice about this is it's separated from the card. So it sucks in air from both sides. This will be really handy if you're running Crossfire and you have 2 cards right on top of one another. It'll still be able to draw air in from the back. So that's pretty cool. On the box they advertise that it is up to 25 degrees Celsius cooler than the stock. And real test in the real world, like 6-7 degrees. In fact, I'll pull it up right now. Full load, the reference was at 67 degrees Celsius, and full load with this one, 60 degrees Celsius. So there's a little bit of room to overclock. Now this one also comes with something called iTurbo. It's like a really easy to use overclocking tool. If you've ever used like MSI Afterburner or the EVGA's Precision X software, it's pretty much like identical to that. There may be 1 or 2 extra features in this, so really easy to use, and a lot of the graphics card companies are doing that, so it's nice to see HIS bundle some software with the GPU. Also, this card supports a lot of displays. On the back we have 2 mini display port, 1 DVI port, and also 1 HDMI port. You can run 4 displays at the same time, and you can even create an Eyefinity, sort of like an Eyefinity array with all 4 displays. You guys came for benchmarks, so let's talk about benchmarks. I ran all these games at 1920 by 1200 at the max settings. So let's start off with Crysis Warhead. Everything's on Enthusiast. The 7870, 44.6 frames per second. Now I overclocked it to 1103 megahertz. That's a pretty small overclock, 103 megahertz. You can push it even further. It was like 64, 65 degrees, so not too bad at all. But at that frequency, I was able to achieve 48.2 frames per second. Now I did one test with 3 monitors, 5760 by 1200. And Crysis on max settings at that resolution, 17 frames per second. When I get back into town, I'm getting ready to go to New York like as soon as I finish this video. When I get back into town, I will test this in Crossfire, and I will also do some Crossfire Eyefinity testing for you guys. Moving right along to Crysis 2, 1920 by 1200, everything in max, DirectX 11 patch, and also the high-res texture pack. This card gets 41 frames per second. With the small 103 megahertz overclock, we're able to get 44 frames per second, so a little bit better there. Metro 2033, this thing freaking blew me away. And the Crossfire, the scaling in Metro 2033 is unbelievable. It's like 90%. But let's just talk about one card right now, and I'll do the Crossfire review later. One card, everything on max, 68 frames per second. It beats the 680 that I tested a couple weeks ago. So Metro must just really run well on Radeon graphics cards. With the overclock at 103 megahertz, 72 frames per second. So... And one other thing I want to note about this, I noticed that the blacks were a little bit nicer with this card than what I'm used to. The dark areas in the game, especially games like Metro, you could really see a lot of detail, and it wasn't just solid black, and I really liked that. I wanted to test the source engine out just a little bit, so I decided to load up Black Mesa, because everyone's playing that right now. And in Black Mesa, just running around, I got 186 frames per second. That's pretty crazy. Now, in the beginning of the game, you know, when the event occurs, you know what I'm talking about, when you're in the test chamber. During all that, when all the effects are going crazy, 116 frames per second. Last, I decided to test Skyrim because this does have 2 gigabytes of GDDR5, and I wanted to make sure that, you know, Skyrim wasn't going to break that because I have the texture pack installed. I have the official texture pack. I have the, I'll show you a list of everything I've got on the screen, but I have tons of different textures. Everything in the game is pretty much modified. So I'm not playing the consolitis version of Skyrim. I'm playing the freaking PC version of Skyrim. And at 1920 by 1200, everything set to ultra, everything turned all the way up as high as it'll go, 72 frames per second. With the overclock at 1103 megahertz, 77 frames per second. Not bad. Now, one thing that I've noticed about this is it seems to get better as the drivers get better. The latest drivers, they really, I think it was like actually, some of the latest drivers really gave Skyrim a boost. For instance, I installed the drivers that came in the box just to see, and this is why you should never install the drivers that come in the box. With the drivers out of the box in Skyrim, I got 40.57 frames per second. Compare that to the 72 frames per second I got with the new drivers. So make sure you always keep your drivers up to date, and these things really do get better with the drivers. I feel like that's one thing that kind of holds them back sometimes is the drivers, but as it stands right now, this thing is pretty much just chewing up anything I throw at it at 1920 by 1200, so I'm happy about that. My gripes right now, as far as productivity goes, OpenCL is awesome, and these things are very powerful for OpenCL, so if you're doing like Bitcoin mining or, you know, like folding at home, that's going to work out just fine. Also, if you're going to be doing things like, you know, 3D work, these will work with that. However, Adobe Premiere does not work yet. I got all excited because I saw online that Adobe was supporting OpenCL, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. So I get these cards, and I read the fine print, and I'm like, oh, only on Mac. It works in Photoshop, and Photoshop is much faster, but I'm using Premiere a lot, so I really was hoping I would find something that would work with Premiere. If you need Premiere, CUDA is still the way to go, so you're going to have to grab an NVIDIA card. However, if you're just getting a card for like general use, and you want something that's really good for gaming, and also something for $200 that performs like a $300 card or even better, it's a really good way to go. I'm going to keep mine for now. I may upgrade to something to support Premiere a little better, but I do play a lot of games, and the performance and also just the quality of the picture that I get out of this is really nice. If you guys have any questions, feel free to email me, inbox@techsyndicate.com. Subscribe, and I will do the Crossfire and the iFinity video as soon as I get back in town, so stay tuned for that. I'll also be doing an overclocking tutorial using the iTurbo software. See you guys next time.